everything mobility. In a special way, we recognize the presence in our midst of Dr. Cosmas Mwikirize, who is the superintendent of industrial value chains, but you can simply call him the chief government scientist. And we recognize the presence of each and every one of you who has voted time to be here with us tonight. We have a special guest, Agatha Nambuya, who's going to be talking to us about a very special topic. And without wasting a lot of time, we would wish to welcome her and give her the floor to tell us who she is and take us through the journey of how we ensure inclusivity and gender equality as we transition to e-mobility in Uganda. Agatha, over to you.
So I'll just start from the beginning. Like I had earlier said, my name is Agatha. I'm an engineer by profession, and I have been working within the automotive sector now coming to about 10 years, a little bit over that, but 10 years now. I'll keep introducing myself and talking about my experience as I share with you through the presentation. And today we are just looking at a gender perspective into e-mobility. How can we create an inclusive mobility ecosystem? Okay. So here I was just trying to show how the entire ecosystem is, and at the center of it, we're looking at serving the customer, and we are looking at the best service we can provide that is responsive to both to the customer, irrespective of their location, irrespective of their gender, irrespective of their socio-economic status. And we are just looking to build an ecosystem that serves them right. Within the ecosystem, we have the EVs, which is mainly the manufacturing. We have the regulation, which is policy, government, and all that. And then we have infrastructure, which is a lot of charging infrastructure. We have the station operators and other utilities within this sector. Then we have the e-mobility platforms, and this is where we are getting many players from abroad, and this could be the likes of Uber, the likes of Uber, and then we have local ones like Safe Border. We have a lot of ride-sharing platforms, and this could even go into the public sector where we have a platform for the buses booking tickets and everything like that. I know there has been a player in the private sector, but definitely they can even be a public one. So those are some of the platforms that will be driving the sector. But at every stage, the sector has to be very inclusive, even from the simple factor of ideation. When you're thinking of an idea, how then do you make it inclusive? From suggestions, and this is through collecting data, it could be through a lot of questionnaires, questioning people, or bringing in people from the different sectors and different genders. This is including them and saying, you know what, I'm designing an electric bus, but this is what my mind has thought of. What do you think we can tweak? What can we change? And through that, someone can tell you, oh, as women, we need a platform at the entrance, so we need a side step, or we need a space for luggage, or this is just to tender to the needs of these women, and also it could be elderly people, or even people with disabilities. So at every stage, the whole ecosystem has to be inclusive. I spoke about some of the products that have been produced within our market. Of course, we haven't seen the sedan locally produced, apart from the prototype we have with the SMAC, the Kira SMAC. But then we have seen a lot of, about three cars, I think Teslas, which are within the East African community. And those are the sedans. And even the product you produce, it will target a specific gender or in the way it's designed. For example, I'll give an example of the boda boda or the scooters. In Uganda, in our context, they're majorly used by men. And if you look at the clientele and even the people they employ within, let's say, border work or Zembo, these their niche market is male. And so even if you look at the people who have made the designs, they're mainly male. So even if you look at the people who are participating within there, you would see the highest percentage is male. Then there's the bus, which this one is a public transport kind of EV. And we can look at it. I was earlier on saying that if you look at the Tondeka bus, it has a little bit of room for luggage. And if you look at who travels with luggage most, if you today, even now, if I said, okay, we are going for a small trip here, probably all the men will not carry anything, but you'll find women pulling cases. So even in designing a bus, which is going to be used by both sexes, you have to be cautious that women will be carrying luggage, and therefore there has to be an area for luggage. So just small things like that show that there's an inclusivity into the design and the make of something that is being done. So now that we know all this, what makes an inclusive, what makes a mobility system, ecosystem inclusive? Like I earlier on said, these are some of the factors that you have to look at. There's no definition, as we can say, what is social studies, but there is the aspects that you look for to say that this is an inclusive mobility system. It can serve both genders. It can serve different demographics. It can serve different social classes. It can serve different geographical areas. So these are 8 aspects. One, it has to be empowering, both to those who are designing it and to those who are going to be using it. It has to show an aspect of empathy, that you have stood in the shoes of those who are going to use this and understood that this is what they need. So for example, like I again use the point of luggage, and also there's the bell that you can ring for the driver to stop when you reach your station. And that's something that is thought of, because if someone were to move from the back of the bus to the front just to notify the driver, oh, that's my stop, or if they had to tap through the whole bus to get their stop, that would not be a thoughtful design into that EV. So it has to be equitable. In gender terms, it has to be equitable. It has to be able to serve both the men and the women and others in a way that is respectful and humane to all. It has to be efficient. It has to be, and I'll speak more about accessibility. Also safety, I'll speak more about it. I'll speak more about it because at the core of transport and mobility, people have to feel safe using these systems. So I gave an example earlier on of the current culture within the taxis, where there are like a zillion conductors trying to push you into one of their cars, and then when you're getting out, there's a whole, when you're getting in, there's a whole struggle getting in, there's a whole struggle getting out, their phones being stolen. So there's so much bad culture and unsafe spaces around even our mobility within Kampala. So it has to be safe, even as we design and we say, okay, we have a stop at City Square, so how can we make it safe? Those are things we have to think of when you're going into designing this mobility, into the mobility sector. It has to be accessible, and of course one of the major areas which are known as the city center is City Square itself. But however, if we expand our minds and say, okay, we're going to have 980 buses, how about if we have one at Nakawa, we have at the major estates, the Senalia is a major estate, we have at Nalia Estate, we have at Bugolobi Flats, to just make it accessible to people who need these buses. And then, of course, the point of affordability, like I said, it's one which really has been, I think, understood by the public transport system, which is 1K for every stop. Wherever you're stopping, it's 1K. And it speaks to understanding what inclusivity in terms of socioeconomic classes is, because at least within this economic climate, 1,000 is something that people of different social classes can pay. It has to be convenient. It has to be convenient, and this is in terms of when is it working. If you hear of many metro transports around the world, they operate 24/7, and so someone shouldn't be worried that I have to leave my workplace before 7 because the bus will not be available after 7. If not, even the schedules should be provided on a platform to say, okay, these are the operating hours, this is where you can find it. In case you're late, this is it. So it has to be convenient for the user. So these are some of the aspects at every stage of the ecosystem where you have to say, okay, if I'm designing a policy, is this policy empowering? Is it empathetic? Is in gender terms, is it equitable? Is it efficient? Many policies I've seen in Uganda are designed, but they are not efficient. They can't work. And then if you design something that is not accessible, you're also failing. It's not inclusive. At the end of the day, you have to, at least are, whether it's a charging point. So you know points, and then you put one in a swampy area where at night no one feels like they can even access it because they just feel unsafe. So at every stage of the ecosystem, these principles have to be taken in to say that this is then an inclusive system. So to what extent is immobility in Uganda inclusive? Of course, we have to take into account that immobility in Uganda is still just burden. We are in our okay, let me exaggerate it. We are in our first 30 years of immobility. However, people have been doing a lot of research for over 50 years, 100. People have been wondering, what can we do to reduce the emission levels? And that's where the electric cars have come in tough, because we had emission levels of Euro 1, Euro 2, as they try to reduce, and Uganda is catching the dream. It's some time into it. So even as we think of it, it could be the best stage to start thinking of inclusivity, because if we are just at the beginning, we are budding, it means we have opportunity to shape many things. And that is the opportunity that many people are now working backwards towards and saying, oh, this wasn't right. We should to these buses to learn from the different metro systems around the world, and we can say, now, if this failed here, maybe we can do this to improve ours. So this is just a kind of a it's designed to have around 4 people at the back and then 1 driver. So it's let me say it has 5 wheels, 4 at the back for the trail and then 1 at the front. So that's one of them. So these are some of the women. I went to research and say, okay, are women really participating within this sector on a global scale? Who are participating? And these are some of the sector, major contributions within the mobility sector. And of course, I can't pass this in Musisi, who her impact we felt when she was within KCCA for one of organizing the cities and also doing the whole smart city movement, which was really, really going to be good for us. But I still see it coming on board. So these are some of the women who are doing major contributions within the mobility sector. And you can go and read more about them and look more institutions. So how do we get in more women within the sector? I'll just share some statistics within my journey moving from engineering school into the working space. Within engineering school, my class had 25 students and 3 of us were girls. Our department for that year, particularly 2010, we had 100, I think roughly 100 students within the mechanical department. And the other classes had about either 2 to 3 girls. So the ratio was about, I could say 10 to 100. For every 100 students, you could count 10 were girls, meaning it was an 1 to 9 ratio for girls. Again, girls to boys was 1 to 9. And now when I moved into the working space, and I'll just jump to like the third company I worked with, which had, because the first and the second, I was the only lady within the engineering department. But the third one, when we were recruited under our lot, we were 3 girls. However, again, when we went into the workshop space, there were 60 technicians and we were 3 girls. So which again gave us a ratio, a very huge gap within the ratios of women working within this sector. So even when we talk about it being inclusive, meaning women have to be part of it, from the design stage to ideation to manufacturing to all the platforms. And why I am emphasizing the point of women is because this is a male-dominated space. I joked with a friend earlier that I looked at the picture which was shared of the mobility players who were meeting the president, and I only spotted 2 ladies. And I was curious. The photo had about 30 people, and there were only 2 ladies, meaning already there is a discrepancy. No matter if these are the people who are in the ecosystem. So if the people at the top, it's 2 to 30, what is the indication at the bottom? So it never, what you see is indeed the true picture of what the representation of how the mobility sector is moving, and the involvement of women within it. That is how it is at the moment. So how do we get more women in? One is one of the biggest barriers we have had within our sector is the lack of female mentors, of female facilitators, of female role models. We could look at the Tesla and we know that it's Elon Musk at the head of it, but it's still a male figure. So we need to have more female facilitators, more faces to say that if you want to tell someone you can do it, just don't say it, show them that they can do it. And how better to show them that they can do it than by using a gender that speaks to their challenges, which understands their challenges. So these are some of the ways we can really get more women in. Let's have more women as facilitators. So another thing around this is that a lot of women come in and they don't stay. And then we're asking ourselves, why don't they stay? Why don't they stay? And this is because many women are harassed within our sector. And that's why we should develop a culture of women's dignity and useful occupation. And I don't think the intention of our co-workmates is really to harass these women or what, but the behavior that they have with their colleagues should be different. It's brought in a way that we have to teach it. We have to have such talks and say, okay, this what you're doing is not right. And this is from my experience working within this sector. When I started at one of the organizations, there were a lot of sexual advances. Really, they were not necessary because you're in a space of 60 men. So I don't think you need any of them hitting on you at that time. There are also very ridiculous comments about women's bodies or the shape or this. Those are all unnecessary comments when you're working with women. And because women are a gender that is very sensitive to comments, to what we say, so we should be aware that this is a different gender. And by being aware, we restore dignity to them and make their occupation very useful. So those are some of the things we should be able to realize, that, oh, this is a different gender, and maybe our language should be different. And then also when it comes to policymakers, they should be able to put policies that protect the women working there. There should be policies. And then even when we come to design, even if it's just within the manufacturing sector, like I said, if you know your user is a female and they move with kids, they carry a lot of luggage, they wear high heels, they wear clothes which may not necessarily be able to go onto high platforms. And so there are some things you have to put in mind when designing even the EVs that women will use. So these are the same things you have to factor in even when working with women. How do we preserve their dignity? So in even working with women, that's one of the things you have to be able to convey within the workspace. And then safety wear, overalls, boots, goggles, these are things that have to be provided. And I can share an experience I had with one of the companies. I don't think they were ready to receive women within their engineering sector. So when we arrived, overalls were being shared within the workshop. So since there were only men, they used to share overalls. So when we arrived in this, we had to share overalls with men. And I could say, thank God, one of my lecturers happened to be, I was still at university, one of my lecturers happened to be the one facilitating our training within that same company. And so to make it very uncomfortable for him, I started to use his overall. So I told him I'll not be using all the other guys' overalls until I get my own. So that created a situation of a little bit of uncomfort, and then they were able to address that issue. They brought in and were able to be measured for overalls, they had to bring in a catalog for women. So even the way these spaces are designed, we are not accounted for. There's no safety wear for women, there are no shoes for women. So you have to just fit into the men's world, which it doesn't have to be like that. There has to be an openness to having women there. So there has to be a catalog for women's shoes. There have to be overalls for women. There have to be capes and goggles. All these things have to be provided to make the space, again, safe for women to work in it. Creating accommodative spaces like washrooms, dress rooms. And this is to speak from, again, my experience. If all of you remember, the first Tata we had was at Ginger Road. That's one of the companies I first worked with, and really very inclusive. By then, there was only one dressing room, which was for the men, as they never had women within their workshop. And my personal experience is that I had to share this dressing room with them. So before going to change into my overall, I had to make announcements, oh, I'm going to change all this. So the whole company had to know the Agatha is going to change into an overall, so we don't have to enter the dressing room. Then we had to use the same bathrooms and toilets with them. So this, remember, men's toilets have urinals. So these were quite uncomfortable situations to work in, and I didn't feel like I needed to stay there long because we were never planned for within that building structure. But of course, if you look at today, they have a very good facility which has really been thought through and really can accommodate both genders. Women and men can work within the facility. But before that, it was not like that. So seeing some of those advancements within the sector. So remember, we give a report to the people we go to. We say, oh, don't go to this place. There are no bathrooms. This place, there are no this. This place, they are harassing women. So those are some of the things that are pushing us out of this whole ecosystem as women. So women have body changes and seasons. And we have to be aware that these seasons are coming and these seasons do happen. And this is not a reason not to give a woman a job or to sideline her from a higher job which can be more engaging for her. We should be able to adapt and know, because Ugandan men, once you're pregnant, they want to carry you like an egg. Yes, which is good, but they should be able to give you room to work and not think that at any point you're going to break, because we are built for these changes and we can still work with all these changes within all these changes. So men have to be very aware that these seasons will come, but how do we deal with them as they come? It's not a reason not to give women jobs. Women can have jobs even with these seasons, but also it comes to address things like policies. These should be seasons which are accommodated within our policies, within our working spaces, and no woman should be made to feel less just because they are passing through a different season and phase of their life. So these are some of the barriers we have within the mobility sector for women to work in, for women to be able to participate within the mobility sector. I would like to invite, if there are any questions. I don't want to go on rambling, wondering, do the people on the other side really get what I'm saying? So if there are any questions, I'd be glad to answer them. Yes.
Thank you very much, Agatha, for such a moving presentation, which has sent the tank into a totally different space than what we are accustomed to here. Before we invite questions, I wish to observe a few things. One, the mobility, the e-mobility champion, the Honorable Minister, is female. I think that is a plus. And yesterday, the President reminded all of us, the actor, that she's in charge. If you want to do anything in this space, work with her in order for us to be very well organized. But also, I'm aware that the Mobility Bureau at the Office of the President, it has currently 2 staff, 1 male, 1 female. So we seem to be making some interesting statements on that front. Nonetheless, you've articulated the fact that a lot more work needs to be done. In a special way, allow me, before we open up the tank for comments, to recognize the presence of the Honorable Minister of Science, Technology and Innovation, Honorable Dr. Monica Musenero. And I would wish to give her the floor to greet the participants in the tank and make her preliminary observations on this very important presentation and topic, which requires a lot of reflection on how we address these issues to work together and empower everyone, men or women, as we work. Honorable Minister, you're welcome to address us. Over to you.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Agatha, for such a wonderful, wonderful presentation. Thank you and welcome all members in the tank. It's been a while. I missed the first return presentation. I was putting a lot of pressure on Paul to bring back the think tank. Before I make specific comments, I want to, first of all, thank the team leaders for the think tank. This think tank has birthed a lot of things which are really positive and progressive. A lot of things which are going to drive our nation forward. So sometimes you think you're doing something small, you come make a presentation here, and you don't know how far it will reach. So the players that have been gathered largely through this think tank have birthed strategies so far now for two value chains at STI. So I need to give you that feedback that you don't just sacrifice your Thursday evening and come here and spend 2 hours, but you're creating invaluable input into not just the mobility industry, but into the science, technology, and innovation ecosystem in the country. So I want to appreciate you and for people who make it to come here and discuss and make presentations. I picked some of my staff whom I have now at STI from, I met them on this platform. I had never known about them. And so far, everybody I have got is working fantastically. So let's put in a lot more thinking and add more value, because this think tank is an invaluable tool as we move. Now, coming to Agatha, made a lot of comments, a lot of remarks, which are so powerful. We will have to make a deliberate effort. We had this same discussion yesterday on Tuesday, as we got up to go inside. I told everybody I have serious gender issues. And I told the players, didn't you have some women? He said, well, we didn't bring them. I was like, okay, maybe they are there, but they're not in the primary positions where you'd be here, where they would be here, because in the entire entourage, as you observed, there were 2 females, me and Madame Roy, in the entire. And I was making the comments that all these black suits, and some companies had 2 people come, they were all male. So it was kind of a point of awakening and saying, this is an industry where on both the supply side and on the consumer side, we need to be very, very cognizant of gender issues. So I really appreciate your presentation. Just a few things, especially specifically when we are thinking about mass transport, even the sedans or private cars in e-mobility. One, women move with children. Women tend to move with children, either babies on their laps or toddlers. Out of every passengers, every 10 who are moving with children, possibly 8 or 9 will be female. And sometimes they have 1 or 2 women, and children. And there are issues. You are getting onto the car, you are carrying this baby in your hands, but there is a toddler that also has to get, they are scared of getting onto this strange vehicle. Where do we incorporate the point of empathy and making room to make sure that children are comfortable on the bus, on the mass transit, and children, because the female gender and children are synonymous. So I thought that we needed to think about that. The second issue was the facilities on the bus, especially in the long haul vehicles, like the Kayola coach. It's a different thing to give us a washroom. It's a different thing for that washroom to be gender sensitive. Women have seasons, as Agatha said, they'll be traveling on a long journey, but they are in their periods. They need a place where they can change their pads and not travel very anxious that they are going to. So it adds to their enjoyment. So even as we design those things and provision of small things like put some sanitary towels in there, so that should one woman along that 4 or 5 hour journey suddenly go into her period, she knows that I have an emergency which I can use until I get to another place. So just being sensitive to some of those things that there will be some provision for me to be able to. Thirdly, even the messages that we put on the buses should be gender sensitive. We should, because I am looking at, especially mass transit, as really becoming a very powerful avenue for mass communication, a very powerful. We can have radios, but I would prefer that zone in the mass transit, it should be a communication channel of itself, where we have this person for 30 minutes, for an hour, for 15 minutes, and it should be a communication channel. They can always listen to radio elsewhere, but here we should package. So the information which is useful, which is for the women, it should also be thought through in the communication. Of course, I want to thank Chiramo that we have the kneeling bus that we can enter and the bus can come down and people enter. I think that's more of disability, but looking at the gender. What I noted down another issue. I think we will have to address some of the gender issues earlier in the education system. We will have to move a bit upstream, because I trained as a veterinary doctor, and vets were always very few women who these days there are more, and we can learn a lot from the veterinary profession in America. Those years, several years ago, there were no women in that profession. Right now, the men are the minority. Out of every 10 vets graduating from veterinary schools in America, 9 are women. For them, they have gone overboard on the other side. So the profession needs to be demystified from the colonial mindset, which was inherited. And this has to be done upstream, and definitely at STI, we will be thinking, how do we have more girls? How do we have the girl child love the professions, love the subjects? How do they access the space? Should we now move affirmative action from being, everywhere, but keep it and really encourage? And also, of course, the instruction and the instructors and the amenities which are provided to make sure that they also succeed. Now, people may wonder why, they can be elsewhere, but also in the design of things, when you don't have a woman on the team or in a particular area, you're going to miss 50% of the perspectives. It doesn't matter whether you have 100 men. If you don't have a woman inputting into the thinking, into the design, into color codes, into the messaging, you're missing the other gender. So this is a very, very important, and especially as we transition, I would love to see how the bicycles, the two-wheelers and the three-wheelers really innovate to accommodate women. I've seen in some countries, they've made smaller mopeds, they've made things which are more female gender friendly. And when you go to countries like Vietnam, you see all girls riding. But here we have this huge masculine motorcycles, you fall and it crashes your little leg. How can we, even as we transition to e-mobility, e-motorbikes, how do we make them gender friendly so that it becomes an accessible technology that the women can use? Thank you very much. Thank you again, Agatha, and thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Honorable Minister, for setting the floor for enriching conversation and inviting actors to really have gender perspectives integrated into mobility design, especially as we transition to e-mobility, to cater for the needs specifically of women on top of catering for the general needs of men. If I was Donald Trump, I would fire Agatha where she is and hire her elsewhere. But it is difficult since I'm not Donald Trump. So you're not yet fired, but some questions are being fired. I see Anita, Wandera Kathy, and then Dr. Cosmas. So in that order, please make your contribution to the discussion. Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much, Agatha, for your presentation. I was actually very excited when I saw the advert for this session, and it was a lady presenting, and moreover, a young lady. I was very excited. This was very informative. I made some observations, and it was really good that you covered the aspect of improving the infrastructure to cater for the needs of both gender. Sometimes when we emphasize women, it seems like, oh, we are forgetting the men. But I think that whenever you take care of the women's needs, somehow the men are even catered for much more. Because if you cater for a need of a mother, that child she's carrying is a child of a man. So once his child is safe, his family is okay. So I would just like to emphasize that when we talk of taking care of the mother, it seems like it's for the mother. It's actually for the benefit of the man. So I see here that we have stakeholders in various aspects in this issue of improving e-mobility. And so players like the road infrastructure needs to improve. And I was also introducing other aspects besides women and the elderly and mothers. There is also the disabled. How do we take care of people who have disabilities like the blind? Usually they're moving with their white canes. And recently there is a blind person who was in touch with me, and he told me he was knocked on the road sometime early this year. It was really so sad to hear that. But how do we take care of, for instance, having sounds or something to notify them of obstacles on the road? It would also be helpful. Then on gender issues, thank you so much, Agatha, for highlighting those challenges. But I also want to encourage you. I am just like you. I have been in a male-dominated environment that I find that the positive part about it is that we female engineers can discuss easily with men than other women in other professions. I find that when I'm in the environment of men, I can air my views very easily than some women go quiet in some environments where there are many men. So their voice, the voice of a female engineer, I think, can easily be heard. And so we should be champions. So in areas of the work environment, I've also learned that if we put it the other way, we can also use our strength as women to get benefits from working in a male-dominated environment. For instance, I worked in a production floor where in one role, I was actually operating a laser cutting machine. Now, it required me to drive the forklift to bring the steel plates from the store. Now, what I did is I was a friend to my colleagues. So what I would do is I ensure that they were actually very helpful before even I asked for help. They would look at all my job cards and bring all material near my machine. So I would just pick from there. So I didn't have to go a long way to the store to search for my material. And they were very helpful in many ways. When my work is coming out, they quickly come to help you. So they are also, those men can be good supporters. They can support. They can support in some areas. But also, as we work towards increasing the women in the engineering profession, I have been a faculty dean for Faculty of Engineering at Chambogo University until July this year. And one of the things I wanted to do in my term as dean was to improve the performance of female students from undergraduate level and to increase their enrollment at graduate level. So I started the female student mentorship program. I organized some workshops for female students where I would bring other female colleagues, myself, to speak to them, to share. We had, I think, about 3, of course, it was interrupted with COVID break, students go home, come back, but the workshops we organized, the girls were shunning the workshop. Not many of them were coming, and we provided meals, and the boys were even more interested. Women were getting excuses, the girls were getting excuses for not coming, but the boys were many. They're like, "Doctor, when will you organize for us?" And they would even come and share our meals. And I had a lot of food that remained. So I'm saying, we need to go down to motivate the girls at a lower level, because I'm actually thinking of going now to high schools, because probably by the time we wait for them at university, it may be late. So if we went to high school and told them this is possible, it would be helpful. Thank you so much, members. I submit.
Thank you, Dr. Wandera, for such very insightful submissions, and also the particular examples you've given on how you've moved, and especially encouraging the women to stand up and participate. I think that is also going to be equally important, because sometimes in these spaces you find that the women step back and let the guys do the thing. So that, I think, is good coming from you. Dr. Cosmas, please go ahead.
Thank you, Paul, and thank you, Agatha, for the presentation. Great thoughts on how we can take stock of gender equality and social inclusion as we transition to e-mobility. 2 points I wanted to note. One piggybacks on what the Honorable Minister mentioned. Women actually do use public transport far more than men, and some studies have even put it as high as 65 to 35%. So it's quite important that we tailor our products to be cognizant of this core market demographic. Secondly, we certainly need to make the path smoother for women at all stages of the e-mobility value chain if we are to create opportunity and reduce attrition of female workers. We have few in the labor force, while some also end up dropping out because of hostile environments and unfavorable employment terms that are sometimes unsavory to balancing work and family life. Now, what most people don't realize is equality and equity are not mutually exclusive. We can attract the best people while at the same time giving opportunity. And we all know that women are superstars. I've had the privilege of working under female bosses most of my life. Indeed, my current boss is one, the mobility champion herself. And the sooner we all realize this, the better. Now, I'll end with a question, not to just Agatha, but the entire tank. I'm interested in learning from the experience of the think tankers here. What are some of those gender-centered policies and proactive interventions that are targeting women in our workplaces. Perhaps some anecdotes like what Catherine has shared could also be teachable moments. Thank you. Over to you, Paul.
Thank you, Dr. Cosmas, and also highlighting that actually there are some Northern stars already in place, women who are providing leadership in these male-dominated spaces. And there is a question, I'm hoping that as Isaac Chigongo comes in, he will provide his answer or his perspective to that question. And later on, we will also get a feel of what Agatha's thoughts are. So Isaac Chigongo, please go ahead and make your submission.
Yes, good evening, participants. I'm delighted to be in this meeting as well. Thank you, Miss Agatha, for the presentation. I'm Isaac Chigongo. I've heard the presentation. I'm having a question here. We've all known that many things have been done in the mobility ecosystem to also suit the feminine gender, to be gender balanced. And however much a lot have been said or a lot have been talked by the activists, people empowering women, women emancipation, but if you're critical and we see that there has been a low turn up onto the alarms being raised. So my question is, for what I think is, there is still phobia in the feminine gender, though many women have come up to rule out that. But if you compare with the percentages of the women coming up and the women that are not showing up, it shows that there is still some phobia in women. So what I think that can be done, there is still more gap of empowering women from right away from the grassroots, not empowering them when they are already grown, but from the grassroots, from young kids who are girls, so that they develop that love in the engineering sector and the things that we see that these are only for the men. Because there's a saying that what a man can do, a woman can do better. This means that there is still a lot of job to be done, a lot of work to be done in empowering women right away from the grassroots. However much the things that Miss Agatha has highlighted are done in improving the infrastructures, the transportation, the ecosystem, but when there is still that phobia, I think there will be a low turn up onto the activities or the infrastructure in their appreciation. So I beg that we can put in much effort in empowering the feminine gender right away from the grassroots when they're still young, to bring up, to appreciate what is done in the mobility ecosystem. Thank you very much. That was my submission.
Thank you, Isaac, for your submission. I wish to invite Agatha back. You needed some time to hear that the think tank is on and that you're not talking to yourself, and certainly
Oh wow.
there is evidence. So please, could you respond to some of these matters and also give a few more perspectives on some other areas which could help us on that inclusivity quest for having more women, especially as we do the e-mobility transition. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Indeed, it's been great hearing feedback from the other side and knowing that people are attentive, and this is definitely an issue we are all concerned about. Honorable, thank you for being available for this, and also for representing us. Even if we're only two, we're represented at least. So we did see the two ladies in the blacks, amidst the black suits. Thank you, Dean of Engineering, that's Catherine, for being here. And it's really good to even hear that now our faculty has a female dean, because in my time we had a male dean. And so those are strides definitely in the right direction. And all the people who have been able to contribute, I just want to share a little bit about my journey again, so that we get an insight into who is talking on the other side, but also to say that I've journeyed through, and the more I go ahead, the more encouraged I am to keep on the path. So I'll just talk a little bit about myself. My background is that I am an automotive and power engineer. I studied from Chambogo University. I did a diploma and a bachelor's degree in automotive and power engineering. I'm also a certified Toyota technician. I had to undertake a 2-year course with Toyota, and I was able to complete it, and I'm a certified Toyota technician. I've also participated in a lot of skills contests within Toyota, because it's one of the companies I worked for long, about 6 years. So I did a national skills contest where we were competing, and I like mentioning this because I was the only lady in these competitions, and they were all guys. Because of the percentages, they were really against me, but I'm glad that I emerged as the winner within Uganda, and I had an opportunity to travel down to South Africa to compete with other champions from different countries from all over Africa, where I also still emerged as a champion. And I have been featured on the Toyota Society of Champions in Japan. We also had an innovation marathon in 2019, which was hosted in Zambia, where also I managed we designed a project which was based on making spare parts affordable within the Ugandan market. And this is a project I implemented with my team, and our team achieved gold within that year. I've worked with several companies, from the two-wheelers, that's the TVS Motor Company. I've worked with Tata Motors, I've worked with Toyota Uganda. Then I've also worked, this is a new space I joined, which I've gotten to love a lot, and that is the startup section, which is SMS Auto, Suez Auto. And finally, I do run my own consultancy firm, which is Auto4 Company Limited, where I focus on supporting businesses within the mobility sector to build businesses that are world standard, because most of them are not, but also that are inclusive, that encourage women to work there, that stretch out to other sectors and help them to use automotives in the right way. So this is just a little bit about myself, and moving through all these sectors right from school, and having a male dean. Now the changes that have happened is a female dean, having probably a class of 3 female students and the other were male. I think a lot is changing, and we have to appreciate even the affirmative action of the 1.5 that appoint the others at A level to enter university. That small affirmative action is making a change for women like us who have gone through the system. And also a lot of contribution, those seminars you organize and the girls turn up, or a few of them turn up. I know we have to make them more chic. We have to make them more youthy and more attractive for the girls to come. But they do make a difference when you're on the other side. In retrospect, when you view it in retrospect, it's going to make a difference. Even if 2 girls show up, they will encourage other girls to show up. So the effort we are putting in right now is definitely not in vain. And the things that we are doing, even at the upper end of the value chain, it's not in vain. But again, like we said, we have to go downstream. We have to go to making the way the Chinese are doing it. I love how they do their things. Right from when you're in kindergarten, you're making watches, you are building torches, so they're infusing the engineering into their students when they're still infants. And by the time they're adults, fully blown adults, they're so invested in building and manufacturing in that you cannot convince them otherwise. And that's how they've managed to industrialize and become definitely a hub, something we look up to, we import from them. Our major, many of our imports are from there. So those are some of the cultures we have to build. I was happy to see that Kenya is starting coding from primary schools, and those are the changes we have to see. So even as we think of how do we get women as within the system, it has to come from primary school level, elementary level, to tell them these are the transport systems we have. This is how you can participate. And of course, with Uganda Institute of Professional Engineers, we have been able to go out to schools. We're in Makerere, we're at Mutasarere University, and most of the students are saying, which career path do I take? Which kind of job can I get? Because the market is telling them that you have to be a technician, but that's not true. You can be a design engineer. You can be an urban city planner. There are so many careers you can take within even the engineering sector. So it's by going through and taking them and saying, look, there's no one size fits all. When you get here, what are you passionate about? Is it planning? Is it developing policies? Is it? So it's taking them through that career development and saying, this may be an entry point for you. You're going to be a technician just to understand the field. But within this career path, this is how far you can go. You can go into design, you can go into that. So those are some of the things that we have to encourage students within engineering and also below. Then we have to also encourage exchange programs. And I'm one of the beneficiaries of having an exchange program within Toyota, a company I worked for. Of course, I've been able to travel to many of their branches, and I'll give an example of the manufacturing plant for cars in Durban. And I was able to see there's a department, it's called the She department. And in this department, there are no men. The whole lane of that assembling lane is managed by women. And of course, they have boards of showing errors that happen in the manufacturing process, in the assembling process, in everything. They have boards that manage those. They're usually called caravans. And when you look at the section, the She department has hardly any errors, because errors are represented by red dots. That section, the whole assembly lane within that section, hardly has any red dots. And it's something they pride in to say that they are making right choices to have women in certain critical areas because of their attention to detail. And when you walk into that space and you see the whole department is manned by women, you are encouraged to stay. You feel you're in the right place. So it's by having even just a department like that speaks a lot to what can be done for women. If you bring a whole bus of young, let's say, P6 students, P7, and they visit a department which is full of women engineers at work, it makes a whole lot of a difference. But when we don't see this representation within the workspaces we go into, we cannot say that this is a space you can fit in. If we go to an assembling line and they're only men, how do you say this is a space you can fit in? So it's by creating such small things that really make a big impact. So those are some of the ways we can really encourage. Also through training men, and this is because I've done a lot of also trainings within the local garages and seeing how they're moving. Training men, they may not be aware of how their actions impact women emotionally, physically, and also how they make them feel at work. It's by having these gender-lensed trainings and saying, this is what a word like this can do to a female participant within your department. It's by telling superiors, because it's not only colleagues who speak in a way that is not good. Sometimes it's even superiors. And I talk this from a place of experience. When it's a superior, you are more drawn to keep quiet and pull back, because if the person you expect to protect and to give you a safe working environment is the one creating an environment that is unsafe, how then do you participate within that sector? So it's also having the superiors well educated about gender, that we can make some of these things very areas, more women to be involved in more areas. There is a lot of work to be done within the sector, but if you're speaking about what kind of policies can we implement, just going through a policy like the sexual harassment policy, that's one of the forefront gender issues that we are really we need to have within our workplaces. And you go to many workplaces and such a policy doesn't exist. They even don't know that it's possible to harass a woman sexually without sleeping with her or raping her or defiling her. So just having those policies and taking people through them is something that can attract more women within there, because they'll know that if you go to work here, it's a safe space for women to work. Then also having catalogs for women's safety shoes, safety wear, just small things will make a difference. Having female role models, having a whole event which is full of female engineers. So even I like what, again, I'll go back to the Institute of Professional Engineers, what it's doing with the women in engineering. And because I'm a strong participant in it, so I'll just highlight it more. So they've been able to say, you know what, come and we go to schools with you. Let's talk to these students. So the more they see more female faces, they know, oh, there's space for us where we are going. So just small innovations like that can definitely propel us further. Then also advertise opportunities that are gender specific. We are looking for female engineers. We are looking for female technicians. We are looking for female urban planners. And this is because you want women to catch it. I see some organizations with women are encouraged to apply, which is also a very good thing, to always encourage women to apply. And I like also what maybe Toyota also had some affirmative action, and allow me use Toyota several times because I worked there for 6 years. So that covers at least 60% of my working career. So again, when we're entering the Toyota, when I entered Toyota, the exams that were carried out, we had to do automotive tests and to know how knowledgeable we are within the sector. And they used our results to input us within the system. So they had a target of at least 3 girls. So, but when we did the examination, I was the 7th, and then the rest, the 10 were guys. So the 10 were men. So they extended the bar. They said, okay, if in the first 10 we got 1 female, how about in the next 10? Meaning, what if we took in 20? Could we get more females? So they checked and there were more 2 girls within the 20. So they had to get a lot of 21 students in order to cover the 3 women that they were targeting. So those are some of the things, compromises companies have to really make to really have more women in. Thank you. Thank you. Paul, are you there?
Once again, thank you,
Yes.
Agatha, for leaving us with some actionable perspectives and thoughts as well, which we could start integrating into our spaces of operation to ensure that we have more women making the workspaces richer in productivity, but as well as the working experience as well. The minister will give us some remarks as we close, and then we will have a vote of thanks, and I will request one of the women on the call. I don't know, there is someone called Doreen. You will prepare to move the vote of thanks as we prepare to close. But before we close tonight, let me request the Honorable Minister to address the thank. Thank you, Honorable Minister.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Agatha, and thank you, everybody who has been on this think tank this evening. This is a family. This think tank is, as I mentioned in my previous remarks, is providing for us a prototype on how we can run think tanks and make them very, very useful. I specifically thank Agatha for presenting and leading us in this discussion of gender issues in immobility. You know, when I saw the topic, I was like, what is she going to talk about? But the way, Agatha, you presented was just so, so wonderful. I think maybe Paul mentioned this has been our week of glorious immobility. We were before with the president, and he was happy to see us organized and seeming to know what we are doing. And hopefully some gender issues will get into those discussions which are starting tomorrow, Paul. And I want to encourage everybody here, when we are participating in the discussions, we look for where we fit, where we contribute most in our areas of strength, because there is goodwill now for government to support the mobility industry. And I think the future, the foreseeable future, and its shape, its size is in our hands. We are the ones going to shape it. The ball is in our court. So I want to thank everybody who has contributed to the discussion, but also everybody who has participated. Thank you once again. Looking forward to listening to many, many more great discussions on the think tank. Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Thank you, Honorable Minister, for always encouraging us and inspiring us, but also guiding us to inspire greatness. Doreen, are you ready to move a vote of thanks? And before you come in, the 31st will be set in motion. And as we prepare for the 31st session of the think tank, those of us who have something you wish to share with us, don't hesitate to reach out so that we can plan. Over to you, Doreen.
Thank you, CEO, for this opportunity. I would like to thank the Honorable Minister for this platform that encourages many people from different across areas to come and discuss these things, important matters to the nation. And also I'm grateful for Agatha for bringing forth everything that she has shared. These are important things that she has shared that touch ladies. Some of them are not communicated, but yeah, thank you very much, Agatha, for the discussion. It was very insightful. And thank you everyone for the time that you have created to attend this think tank. Thank you very much.
God bless all of us. See you in the 31st. Have a wonderful rest of the weekend. Bye-bye.